Hello, my friends, and welcome in to another edition of the Gardening Simplified Show. Thanks for tuning us in across the fruited and rooted plain, whatever platform you're using. If you're listening on the radio, Wood Radio in West Michigan, if you're listening to one of our podcasts, or watching on YouTube, we appreciate that so much here on the Gardening Simplified Show. And if you want to learn more, Gardening Simplified on Air. We're broadcasting from the beautiful Proven Winners Color Choice Shrubs studio. She is the one and only wonderful Stacy Hervella, and our engineer producer in studio, Adriana Robinson. I'm Rick Weist, and Stacy, it's late October and it's no time to throw in the trowel.
Oh, gosh, no, it's just things are just starting to get going in many ways. There's still a lot of work to be done.
Well, I'm sure you're busy in your garden. I know I am. I love this kind of weather anyhow. I mean, it's beautiful outside, and I'm not ready to give up on the garden. Actually, I never give up on the gardening season. I personally believe gardening is a 365-day out of the year event, but that's just my opinion.
Well, if you're not working in it, you're probably thinking about it.
That's right.
So.
Exactly.
No, I have been really busy in the garden, and not least of all because of the wonderful weather. In fact, the weather has been so favorable here in West Michigan that I still have not emptied my containers from my summer annuals because it's just too warm. They still look good.
Yeah,
it's
they
wild.
do. They do. And, you know, I've brought along some cannas in the studio. For those of you who are watching us on YouTube, I brought along some cannas. Cannas are a fun plant for me to grow in the landscape. Fun to talk about, Stacy, because a lot of people refer to them as canna lilies, and they're not really lilies. And then they'll go beyond that and call them canna lily bulbs, and they're not really bulbs. They're rhizomes, but not to get too technical. Easy to grow, and this is the time of year we dig them up and we store them.
Yes, you do. Some people just let them go, and that's okay too. But
yeah. So I'm waiting for the frost, like you mentioned with your aunt. They're still looking good, and I want the foliage to freeze before I dig them up to store them.
Well, because when you do that, when you allow a bulb like canna, rhizome like canna, to die back like that, what it does is it forces it to immediately translocate all those nutrients in the green stems and foliage and store that into those big, thick rhizomes, so that you can grow it again and again. I think a lot of people think of cannas as a one-season thing, but it is absolutely okay to save them. They're pretty easy to save, so what do you do?
Yeah, and that's well said, because Webster's dictionary definition of a rhizome, you nailed it, is a somewhat elongated, usually horizontal, subterranean plant stem thickened by deposits of reserve food material.
Yes, so all that papery stuff that you can see around each of those little growing points is actually the leaves from a previous year.
And cannas, of course, are nothing new. They've been around for hundreds and hundreds of years. However, here in the United States, they became popular in the year 1893.
Oh, really?
And the reason I mention that is because the World's Fair was in Chicago in 1893, and it's estimated that 1 out of every 4 Americans attended that World's Fair because they had the world's first giant Ferris wheel. They had beautiful lighted displays as the light bulb was starting to work its way into our everyday lives. And then huge beds of cannas that were gigantic and caused people to ooh and ah, and that is technically when cannas became very popular in the United States.
I did not know that. Now, when you go to Chicago in the summer, you still see fantastic municipal plantings, and they do very often include cannas, but I never realized that cannas got their start in the U.S. right there in Chicago. That's fascinating.
So we dig them up at this time of the year. As the foliage freezes, we allow the soil to dry. We cure them. Don't wash the soil off. Allow them to dry for at least a week or so. And then I keep them in a cool area in winter, 40-ish, 45 degrees. Don't let them freeze. And you can replant them again next year. So it is just a simple sample of the many things that we do in our gardens in October. What were you doing this weekend, Stacey?
So I am getting ready to plant garlic. And I hinted at this at the end of the previous show. So it's not quite garlic planting time here in West Michigan yet. You do want to wait until a little bit later in the fall to plant, but you want to be ready so that when those garlic bulbs do arrive on your doorstep, you're ready to plant them. And, garlic is have you ever grown garlic?
I have not, and that's why I asked the question. I've grown so many different types of plants. I admit I have not grown garlic. That's why I'm interested.
Okay, it's super easy. It's dead simple. So basically, if you order if you order it online or buy it from a garden center, you will be getting bulbs. They look very much like the bulbs you would buy of garlic in the store, and you separate out each clove and you plant each individual clove. And each individual clove that you plant will in turn create a head of multiple cloves of garlic that you'll harvest next July. Now, a lot of people might be thinking, hey, this sounds great. I've got some garlic sitting on my kitchen counter right now. Can I use that? And I encourage everybody to try it, but I would say it's not ideal to use grocery store garlic if you can prevent it. Now, if you're just, playing around and you just want to see what happens, by all means, go for it. Mm-hmm. But garlic, there are garlics that are suited to different climates, different latitudes and things like that. And also, if you're going to put the time, it doesn't take a lot of effort. You don't really need to water or fertilize. You pretty much just, stick them in the soil in a sunny spot and let them go. But also, why would you want to devote that to garlic you can go buy in the store anyway? So I've ordered a number of very interesting types of garlic from the South, some Creole garlic. I ordered some Thai garlic from Thailand.
Nice.
And there's also a number of Russian and Italian varieties. So I'm going to have quite the mix of garlic, and stay tuned until July, and then we'll have a show and tell of the actual garlic I've grown.
Keep us posted, and maybe we can use some of it at that time too. That's fabulous. Obviously, cold weather, no trouble for garlic.
No, so you want to plant it now, much like you would other spring bulbs, like daffodils or tulips or crocuses, because what happens is that the bulbs will put on their roots right now. And so they're putting all that energy into growing roots. They'll grow roots, until the temperatures are well into the 40s. Right. And then when spring comes, it starts to shoot up with a green shoot. If you're growing a hardneck garlic, by about June, you get this really nifty garlic scape, which is basically the flowering stem, very rigid, and it makes this cool curly cue, and you just pop those off and you can eat them, and that helps it devote more energy into the bulb. So Fantastic. It's super easy. It's a really fun thing to do with kids, and all you really need is a little bit of space in the sun. And I, like I said, grocery store garlic, not the first choice, but if you do just want to see what happens, I always encourage educated experimentation in the garden.
Sounds great. And of course, it's the time of year also when people are planting bulbs, like allium bulbs. I think we'll probably touch on that when we dip into the mailbag in segment 3 today. It's also the time of year when I do leaf lasagna. Ooh. I put newspaper or cardboard on top of turf, and then leaves on top of that, and then soil on top of that, and just let it cook all winter so that by next spring, I've got a great planting bed.
Now, I need to do some of that myself, but it's on a little bit of a slope. Have you ever tried doing that on a slope?
Slope is rather difficult.
Okay, that's what I was afraid of.
Yeah, slope
we'll have to
is
go
difficult.
back to the drawing board on that one.
But, of course, leaves have a lot of nutrient value. I was reading the other day that the predominant nutrient was potassium in leaves. I thought that was really interesting. That's why my mom was always trying to get me to eat bananas when I was a kid.
Why?
Potassium.
Oh, yeah.
But I don't like bananas.
I don't care for bananas either, so high five
really?
On that, yeah.
Hey, high five for our YouTube viewers here. I'm not into, I like banana bread. I like banana and things.
Love banana bread, don't like bananas.
I think it's the texture or whatever, and I figure I can get my potassium from potatoes and beets and beans and other kinds of food, so I'm going to stick with that. But as far as your garden is concerned, it's loving the nutrients from by the way, do you know that what a banana says when it calls you?
I don't.
You're going to
not offhand.
Yellow. You know those kind of people you call and they answer the phone. They go, yellow. That's what a banana.
Well, can anyone even pick up a banana without doing the phone thing?
Exactly.
It's physically impossible.
Yellow. Anyhow, coming up next, plants on trial. Stacy's going to introduce us to a beautiful plant. It is one of my favorites. But you know what? I say that every week. So stay tuned. Plants on Trial is coming up next.
Hello, hello, and welcome back to the Gardening Simplified show. I'm Stacy Hervella, and I am here with the Canna King of West Michigan, Rick Weiss. We have given him that title. So how many different types of canna do you think you have?
You know, I have more than 12 varieties, I would say. I've become and I'm growing them in containers too, so it's a kick in the plants. I love them. So, Canna King. Hey, that's cool. I'll take that moniker.
You know, Rick, you strike me as the type who might get into breeding cannas in your spare time as you increase your collection. So for our listeners, if you're not familiar with what a canna is, what it looks like, and why Rick loves them so much, please do go to gardeningsimplifiedonair.com, click on the show notes, and we'll have pictures and more resources there, as well as a picture of the cannas that Rick brought in from his own collection to illustrate our table today.
They just give me that tropical feel in summer. I feel like I'm in the tropics. And the hummingbirds love them.
Oh, so, the hummingbirds do. You can't go wrong there.
What can I do? I love plants.
But shifting over to today's plant on trial, we are talking about a plant that, of course, is at its best in fall, and that is Brandywine viburnum.
Yes.
You like viburnums?
Oh, love viburnums.
They are really great. They're very versatile. They're typically known for being very useful for shade. They're also typically known for being very deer resistant, which in my experience is not a well-earned reputation. Not that deer actually damage viburnum plants. They're actually they don't really eat the plants themselves. But you know what they love? The flowers.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Well, who wouldn't? Because most viburnums are very fragrant, right?
Yes, they're fragrant. Yeah. Some smell terrible. Actually, you know, and that's always a fun thing if people are expecting a really wonderful smelling viburnum to be like, oh, smell this viburnum, and they get their nose in it and it smells like a wet hound dog.
Oh, that's rough.
But there are those too. But Brandywine is a native viburnum, so it's native to North America. And we like to say that it has the best berry display of the plant kingdom. And I will tell you, I'm going to describe it for everybody right now. But it is truly a plant that you have to see to believe that it really does take on these colors. So perfectly lovely plant, blooms in late spring, kind of white foamy flowers. These are not fragrant flowers. They're not the worst of the old hound dog smell viburnums, but they aren't a fragrant perfumed one either. They look kind of foamy and very soft and pretty and nice, glossy green foliage. So we talked last week a bit about high quality foliage. This is another example of good high quality foliage. And so, you know, the plant's cooking along. And then in late August, the berries that it set back in the spring start to turn a beautiful, distinctive ivory color. And in short time, those in turn turn bright pink. And then they turn purpley blue. And very often you get all three of these berry colors in a single cluster all together. And while these berries are developing all of these interesting color changes, the foliage is turning bright red. Wow. So that's it's like a 3-ring circus of a plant.
But see, that's why I love viburnum, because the gorgeous spring flowers, the great foliage in summer, the berries in fall, who could go wrong with that plant?
And, you know, it's so versatile. So it is going to be, you know, shade tolerant. Full sun is fine too. And, you know, very often, because you and I garden on the lakeshore where the soil is fairly dry, we do often concentrate on drought tolerance. And Brandywine is actually not a drought tolerant plant. It loves moist soil. And if you find it growing wild, because it is, again, native to North America, it's very often going to be like on the edge of a swamp or, you know, a vernal pool that gets very wet in spring and then kind of dries up. But I do want to talk about, so we know why Brandywine viburnum is a perfect plant to enjoy in fall.
You bet.
But I want to talk a little bit about why it's different and sort of how it got here. Because probably like, as I recall in the 1990s, a selection was made of our native Viburnum nudum, and that is the species that Brandywine is. And it was made at Winterthur Estate in Delaware. So that was one of the DuPont family's estates, and they were very into horticulture and had an extensive garden, and it still is a public garden that you can visit, and is especially fabulous in spring. But they selected a variety of Viburnum nudum there, and they named it Winterthur. And it, they had all these fabulous pictures of the berries that it would get and the fall color. There was just one problem. there was no other Viburnum nudum on the market for winterture to get berries. Now, listeners are very often aware that something like a holly, you need a male and a female plant in order to get berries.
Yeah.
In viburnums, that's not the case. It's not that the viburnum plants are separate male and female. All the male and female parts that you need to get the fruit are contained within a single flower on a single plant. The difference is that viburnums, in order to set that fruit, they need genetic diversity. They cannot pollinate themselves. If they pollinate themselves, no fruit will form.
That's interesting.
So there was really only this one, winterture viburnum, and everyone's like, oh, it gets these fabulous berries. Good luck getting them. And that was kind of a downer because everyone is really excited about it. And sure, it is a native species. And perhaps you would be fortunate enough to live in an area where Viburnum nudum was growing wild and it would pollinate your winterture. But it was not a widespread situation. So plant breeders were immediately like, hey, we got to do something. We got to get another selection of Viburnum nudum out on the market so people can actually enjoy this. And so Brandywine was developed in the Netherlands, in Boskoop, which is sort of the nursery district of the world.
It is.
In the Netherlands. And the gentleman's name is Mark Bulk. He has a nursery there. Still selecting plants. He's also the breeder of quickfire hydrangea, so one of our classic panicle hydrangeas. And so he was looking for something that could pollinate winterture, and he also wanted something that was compact because Viburnum nudum gets pretty huge in the wild, like 10 to 12 feet, kind of rangy and tall, whereas winterture is in the 6-foot range. So he was working on this, and he is the one who selected Brandywine. Now, Brandywine does share that same more compact, landscape-friendly habit, 5 to 6 feet, but Brandywine, in addition to pollinating winterture, does not need a pollinator itself. It is the rare viburnum that is self-fruitful. And what that means to you as a home gardener or landscaper is that you only need to plant one. Wow. So if you have winterture, you need to plant a Brandywine. If you have Brandywine, you do not need to plant winterture. You'll still get fruit. So if you're short on space, it's a great choice. So you'll still be able to get all of that. And so it was really quite a revolutionary plant when it came out. And we have offered it for many, many years because, once people see a picture of those berries, they can't resist. I mean, you really can't believe that it's even possible that something would turn those colors.
It's sensational. There are so many characteristics of viburnum that make it a plant you truly have to have in your landscape. And for folks keeping score at home, Stacy's talking about Brandywine viburnum, and we'll put it in the show notes at gardeningsimplifiedonair.com. Stacy, Boskoop in the Netherlands was greatly influenced by its location on top of a thick peat layer. And then they dig these canals. So you're right, perennials, woody plants in that area of the world, sensational for development of plants. As you mentioned, this one developed there by the, what was the name of the plant breeder?
Mark Bulk.
Mark Bulk. That's fantastic. A lot of these areas in Holland would mine this peat and use it as a heating material, but it was too difficult to ship out of Boskoop, and so they said, let's grow plants instead, and now we get to benefit from Brandywine viburnum. And I had one other quick question for you. I understand that the name viburnum comes from the Latin wandering tree or wayfaring tree.
Yeah.
Wayfaring tree. Now, is that because of the berries that it creates and the birds eat and then they just plant them elsewhere, and that's why it's wandering and just a theory. I'm putting you on the spot.
It's an interesting theory. I actually don't know. That's quite interesting, and that might be one of those things that's lost to time. I'll have to do some research.
It's my theory, and I'm sticking to it.
It's a good story,
Thank you.
And a good story goes a long way in everything, but especially in horticulture.
You got it.
So if you want to add Brandywine to your landscape, you can certainly do that. It will be available at your local garden center in the white Proven Winners container. Full sun, part sun are both going to work, moist soil or irrigation, and you can be treated to your own version of the most spectacular berry display in the plant kingdom. So we have to take a quick break, but when we come back, we are going to answer garden mailbag questions. We've got a bunch of good ones, so please stay tuned. Greetings, gardeners and garden lovers. I'm Stacy Hervella. This is the Gardening Simplified show, and I'm here in the studio with Rick Weist. And as we have made clear on previous shows, we love to help people with their gardening quandaries, questions, conundrums. And as such, you can reach us at gardeningsimplifiedonair.com and just click on Contact Us. Or you can just email us at help, H-E-L-P, at Gardening Simplified on air, and we will answer your questions. I had a little bit of a backlog, but we're going to be working through that. And of course, I get back to everybody. So
wonderful. Keep them coming.
Nobody's wondering if they were heard or not. So, Rick, what do we got in the gardener's mailbag this week?
Well, keep them coming. And Pat, Stacy asked us about starting a new garden with just all allium bulbs for people keeping score at home. I'm not saying alien. I'm saying allium, A-L-L-I-U-M, kind of in the onion family, right?
It is, yeah. Onion. Well, the onion family is the lily family, so it's a big family, but they are related to onions.
Yeah.
It's onion genus.
Remotely related. Anyhow, she's cleared out weeds the past couple days, has 6 different varieties, wondering about putting fertilizer in the hole, and says she lives in Jenison, so it's sandy and rocky, but over the years has added compost to the garden, also very hot. You know, I'd say right off the bat, Stacy, no problem as far as that sandy Jenison soil is concerned. I mean, if you think about it, a lot of these bulbs, including allium, native to these areas that we used to refer to as Persia or, Mediterranean areas, that's not going to be a problem.
Yeah, you know what I learned in horticulture school is that bulbs will do best if they bake in the summer. So they really want to be
a good way of looking at it.
In a condition where the soil is dry, it's well drained. Bulbs really will not do very well over the summer in a spot that's getting consistently watered. So a lot of people, there's a number of reasons why tulips are not reliably perennial. We could probably do a whole show about it.
Yeah.
But to make matters quick, one of the reasons that people do have trouble getting tulips to recur year after year is they're very sensitive to summer moisture, and they very often plant them in their perennial garden or something like that where it is getting a lot of water. And so baking in the summer is exactly what these plants will want. And now, do you fertilize your bulbs when you plant?
I generally fertilize when I plant, and then I make sure every year that I cut off the flowers when they're done, but leave the foliage on to absorb sunlight.
Yep, that's important too. I generally do not fertilize my bulbs when I plant. Now, for many, many years, it was standard advice that you should just take a handful of bone meal and toss it into the hole.
Yeah.
I have heard that thinking on that has changed, not least of all because many people say that the bone meal encourages critters to then dig your carefully planted bulbs, which is not what anybody wants. So, Pat, our answer to you is you've got already pretty much the ideal scenario for being successful with alliums. So get those in the ground and look forward to next spring, and definitely send us a picture because I want to see that.
And my advice would be try all different types. They're deer resistant, obviously. The tall Globe Masters. I have 2 favorites, Christophi and Schuberti.
Oh, those are my favorites too.
I'm hoping I'm pronouncing those right, Stacy, because when they bloom, they kind of look like you remember the old Sputnik satellite from the Russians. That's what they look like. I just love those. So many great varieties.
I've never met an allium I didn't like. I grow a bunch of different types, and in my West Michigan garden, they are actually so happy that they self-sow. So I get a bunch of them sowing seed, and then over time, those form new flowers. I also have a huge planting of the drumstick allium. Okay. Allium spherocephalon, which is really teeny tiny little bulb, so super easy to plant. And I have hundreds of those, and they're just a delight when they bloom in July. So
don't get me started on alliums. They're out of this world. I just love them. Another question from Therese, I believe is how we pronounce her name, Therese. A large yard. I'm going to pitch this one to you, Stacy, because she wants to plant a screening hedge for privacy, but has deer who frequent the area. Now, of course, as I said, we're broadcasting from the beautiful Proven Winners Color Choice Shrubs studio. And so what better place to ask Stacy about what should we use as a hedge? And what are we going to do with these deer?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I have to say it is one of the most challenging garden features to resolve with plants when you have deer. It really is. And I know Therese asked specifically about using a 9-bark in her hedge.
Yeah.
And I have to say that even though 9-barks are generally believed to be deer resistant, mine are often eaten by deer.
Okay.
And not to the point where, they've eaten them down to nubs and the plant will never recover. But what I often find is that sort of right around the time they bloom, because we were talking about viburnums in deer, and that deer often go after the flowers. It's the same with 9-barks. The flowers are much more appealing than the plant. So even though they don't cause a lot of damage to the plant, they are kind of taking away the flowers. Now, 9-barks are nice enough. They have colorful enough foliage that it's not like you're missing out.
And they respond well to pruning too, right?
They
bounce back.
They will put out a bunch of different shoots. But so I would not recommend 9-bark for deer. I would say I have tried so very many things in creating a hedge to both deter the deer and create a little bit of green privacy in my yard. And I have given up on everything except juniper.
Really?
Yeah, I have. I tried privet. The deer and rabbits ate that. I tried elderberry. The deer and rabbits ate that. I have put up a hedge of 9-bark or a couple 9-barks to try to block off an area of my property. They ate those. Now, again, I have crazy deer because they're urban deer, and urban deer are much more aggressive and curious than rural deer are. But, knock on wood, the junipers that we planted, I did spray them right away just to be perfectly safe. And I would say as long as you have a good sunny spot and well-drained soil, I think the juniper is the one-shot option for a privacy hedge. If you can do something lower, boxwood is a great choice because that is another one they almost never eat.
And I'd throw into the mix, and of course I know I'm the one who's always living on the hedge here, okay? However, I would throw into the mix, number one, maybe Therese would consider the viburnums that you talked about in plants on trial, and also consider the fact that diversity, in my opinion, is important in a landscape. Maybe try a variety of plants in that screen. Yep. But boy, I would have some viburnum in that mix too.
They call it a tapestry hedge when you have a bunch of different things all together, and it can be very lovely. So I would say look up some tapestry hedge online, get some inspiration. Another thing you can consider if you really have your heart set on a flowering hedge would be bridal wisteria. Oh, yeah. It's a good old-fashioned variety. Its bloom time is short but magnificent, and I think it's so pretty. And it just has that wonderful old-fashioned spring feeling. So I do like that plant.
Absolutely. Mark's asking us about yucca plants. Yuccas, those are a plant you either love or you don't like them. He says, I've been digging at this plant since I moved into my home 4 years ago, trying to get rid of it. He thought he had dug all the way down, got rid of it. Now sprouts coming up again. It's one of those plants where you really start to seriously debate whether or not moving is a viable option. Don't do that. Also, plastic explosives, don't do that. Do not recommend that at all.
Do you speak from experience?
I'm going to pass on answering that question. However, as far as yuccas are concerned, you'd be surprised if I answered that. I'll answer that off air. As far as yuccas are concerned, yes, you have to dig deep. You have to get to the taproot. In my opinion, you have to get yourself some brush killer. Once you get down there, make a fresh cut on the taproot and apply it directly to the taproot. That's the only way I've found that works.
Yeah, they do have a very thick, fleshy root that goes way down. And, a lot of things, like, say, a dandelion. So a dandelion is a plant with a taproot that a lot of people are familiar with. And if you get at least, the top quarter of the taproot, your dandelion's done. You've taken the buds off. Whereas the yucca, I have found, can root way, way down on that taproot and just put up a little, root thing that sends the next shoot up. So I would say, you are going to need to keep digging. I have found, I haven't sprayed them, but I would guess that even if you are open to using herbicides or something like that to control it, it doesn't seem to me like it's something that's going to respond very well. Very often those really fibrous, thick leaves, they just don't absorb enough of a chemical. Even if you're using something that's less toxic, like a vinegar or an organic herbicide, they're all of the adaptations they have to be so durable and drought tolerant makes it really hard for them to absorb enough of the chemical to actually die through herbicide. So you're going to need to keep up on that. It's a little bit like the ivy question we had last week.
As I've said to people throughout the years who have struggled with this, you, my friend, are in for a root awakening.
So get out the shovel, dig it up, and hopefully eventually with persistence, you'll be able to take care of that yucca problem. And by all means, do not let them seed because they will also grow more from seed. So that brings us to the end of the Gardener's Mailbag for this week. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to have branching news. So please stay tuned.
Okay, my friends, it's time for branching news here on the Gardening Simplified show. And if you dare, enter the zone of abscission.
Well, I think we better tell people what it is before they decide if they're going to dare to enter.
Dun, dun. This is our spooktacular edition of the Gardening Simplified show. Zone of abscission. Now, why would you care? Well, the leaves are falling off the trees, and that's essentially what's happening, right, Stacy?
Yes, there are millions, if not billions, of zones of abscission being formed as we speak.
Because abscission means cutting off.
Yes.
Yeah.
Abscise, when it's the fancy way to say that a leaf is falling is to say that it is abscising from its tree. You have to stick your pinky up when you say that. But so abscission is the botanical term for leaf fall down.
Okay. Well, I can take that.
And the zone of abscission is the zone that forms where the leaf was attached to the tree, and it's going to dry off and actually fall down. So it is an actual physical place.
Because I looked for the official definition. It said the zone in a leaf, petiole, fruit stalk, or branch often marked by a constriction and a separation layer, and then a whole bunch of words that I can't even pronounce, so I'm not going to try.
I saw those. Yeah, there's a lot of fancy
words.
Botany words in there.
But it's the zone of abscission. Sounds like a movie you'd watch around this time of year.
Or a themed room in a haunted house.
Ooh. I like that, too. See, for me, as far as Halloween movies are concerned, Beetlejuice or It's a Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown, that's more of my kind of speed, you know? Casper the Friendly Ghost. Yeah. That's my speed. Although as a true horticulturist, we've got to have Nightmare on Elm Street on the list, right?
Yes.
I guess so.
Little Shop of Horrors. I mean, you can't do much better than horticulture horror movies than Little Shop of Horrors.
Beautiful. Beautiful. We'll give you the last word on that. Okay, an interesting poll or survey on how much are you willing to shell out to update your home. Now, that's really interesting. And in looking at this study, I found that one of the most important things was natural light, windows.
Definitely.
And I agree with that. I have a theory on that. Any home I have ever bought, one of the very first things I've done is looked through the windows, and here in Michigan, when the sun is low in the south in the wintertime, I want to benefit from that. So I want a lot of windows that are facing south to grow my house plants, but also I benefit. So if you're looking to make improvements on your house, and in addition, Stacy, I would mention that we often grow our landscapes in our front yards for curb appeal.
Yes.
But I personally believe we should plant our landscapes for window appeal. In other words, viewing them from inside the house. We should benefit from that.
Yes, it's a great idea because, why let all the passersby have the fun? You deserve a nice view as well.
Exactly.
It's an important part for me too when I'm planting things. I do think about how they look from inside, and especially as I plant a lot for birds and butterflies. If I'm sitting at my kitchen sink, then I want a piece of the action.
Yeah, exactly. And with this particular survey, and we're going to post it in our show notes, for many homeowners, they would like a porch, patio, or deck, a sliding glass door that opens to the outdoors, or a garden. Now, in many cases, initially, we just stick with the most do-it-yourself friendly tasks like a little coat of paint or wallpaper.
Goes a long way.
That natural light transforms a home, and of course, we love our houseplants. We love to view our landscapes. So I would say that what I took away from the study is that windows in our homes are very, very important. I wrote a story once about a broken window. It's saved in my drafts. That was bad.
It was actually so good, I almost didn't get it.
Actually, my jokes can be a real pain. P-A-N-E. But again, if I have to spell out the pun, as Stacy reminds me, it's not worth saying. So there we go. Anyhow, making those improvements are important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Now, also a lot of stuff on the internet about people having their jack-o'-lanterns or their pumpkins eaten. Yikes. There's nothing worse than going to work and coming home and you've got a faceless jack-o'-lantern on the front porch because some squirrel dined on it.
It does happen, but I've got to confess, I love squirrels. They are so adorable, and they can get away with a lot of damage in my yard because they're just so delightful to watch.
They are fun. They are fun. Well, if you have a damaged pumpkin, of course, you need a pumpkin patch. That's how you fix it. Sorry, I'm done with those bad jokes. So I picked up on the internet, people are recommending commercial repellents, hot pepper sauce, Tabasco sauce, white distilled vinegar, eucalyptus oil, dabbing the gourd in eucalyptus oil. I hadn't heard that one before. A lacquer spray, just lacquer the pumpkin. Hairspray.
Oh.
A can of Aquanet from the 1950s and 60s. Wow, that's interesting. Placing an owl statue near the pumpkin. A motion
But not
detector.
a cute owl. So it can't be like a cute owl sculpture. It's got to be one of those ones that's specifically made to...
A mean owl.
Right, not like a garden ornament one. That's not going to do it.
I'll leave it at that. Yeah, do you have that problem with pumpkins?
I do not. I don't actually put out any pumpkins. And if I did, I'd put them out whole, and the squirrels probably wouldn't get them. And I would love watching them. I do have problems with squirrels, helping themselves a little too much to my bird seed, but pumpkins, no problem.
Interesting. So Prince William in the UK is planning to move forward with his father, now King Charles, plans to construct a sustainable garden city. So they're going to develop a garden city with 2,500 homes in southeastern England. The plan is to build a sustainable eco-village stretching across 320 acres of farmland in Kent, England. Wow. That's really, really interesting. And of course, Stacy, local environmentalists are pushing back against the project. Very interesting to follow that story.
Yeah, I was looking it over, and it definitely seems like it's going to be a lot of drama. Yeah. So glad we're not in the middle of that.
Do they still have Knights of the Round Table? Do they sit around a round table? Do they have knights? Is that how they work this stuff out?
Well, the Knights of the Round Table, that was, from the Arthurian legends many, many years ago. They do still have knights, but I don't know whether there's a round table.
If they had an extra knight, his name would be Sir Plus. People have called me Sir Plants a lot before. Does that make me a knight? No?
I think I'll stick to the Canna King of West Michigan for myself. Because a king is, that's a better rank than a knight anyway.
Well, thank you.
So,
I appreciate that.
You've graduated. You've come up in the world here.
A new acquired skill. Sir Plants a lot. All right, so I'm interested this coming weekend, as long as we're talking about branching news, are you still going to be out in the garden? We talked about the garlic, but is there anything else that you're going to be doing out in the garden this weekend? Because again, wherever you're tuned in, if you're watching us on YouTube or you're listening to the podcast or on radio, we've been blessed with great weather here in West Michigan this October and an opportunity to be out in the yard and garden.
Yeah, I still have a lot of stuff that I haven't planted, and I have it on good authority. Being in the nursery industry, one of the big benefits of the job is free plants. And I have it on good authority that we will be having a plant giveaway soon, and that will invariably make more work. What about you?
Nice. Well, I'll tell you what, if I'm the Canna King or King of Cannas, you're the queen of dinner plate hibiscus.
Oh, yes.
Because I know that you're totally into them. And by the way, with these perennial hibiscus, have you cut yours back yet this year?
No, they're not dormant yet. They're getting there, but they're not quite there yet. So I wait till they're completely dormant.
Yeah. I do a lot of my gardening work between Halloween and Thanksgiving. I don't know about you, but I take the opportunity to do that.
Yeah, definitely. So you mentioned YouTube.
Yeah.
Now, I just want to invite our listeners, if you do go to YouTube and watch the show there or tune in to see Rick's Cannas, please don't miss our Halloween video. Adriana, our producer, and some of the members of our marketing team got a little creative this year. And you are not going to want to miss it. So
how do we find that?
So if you go to YouTube, you search Proven Winners Color Choice Shrubs, or of course, if you go to gardeningsimplifiedonair.com and go down the show notes, you'll have a link to our YouTube video right there. And then once you're on our channel, you will have no trouble seeing Adriana's masterful Halloween video complete with special effects.
That is fantastic. Adriana Robinson is our engineer and producer here on the Gardening Simplified show. Thank you, Adriana. You are so talented, and it's wonderful to work with you. Stacy, of course, wonderful to work with you. And we want to thank John Ilk back in the studios of Wood Radio. Let's get ready for this weekend.
All right, let's do it. We'll see you next week.